December 1943, over the steaming jungles and volcanic ridges surrounding Rabaul and the Solomon Islands, Japanese fighter pilots stationed at the heavily fortified airfields began hearing strange intelligence reports. Rumors spoke of a new American fighter entering the Pacific theater, an aircraft with wings that bent downward and then angled upward toward the tips. To seasoned pilots familiar with the straight-wing silhouettes of American machines like the Wildcat and the Hellcat, these reports sounded improbable. Aircraft designs were supposed to be conventional. Wings were straight, tailplanes predictable, fuselages clean and direct. The idea of a bent-wing fighter seemed like exaggerated reconnaissance, or perhaps a misinterpretation from shaken observers under fire. Many assumed the Americans had adopted some experimental design that was unlikely to be practical, let alone effective in combat. But the rumors persisted. The aircraft, according to reports, was faster than anything the Americans had previously fielded. It possessed a massive engine, an unusual silhouette, and an unmistakable profile. Japanese pilots dismissed the idea. Aviation engineering, after all, followed certain rules. A wing that bent sharply from the fuselage seemed structurally compromised, aerodynamically questionable, and likely to introduce more problems than it solved. Then, the Vought F4U Corsair made its entrance into the war, and the Japanese pilots realized the odd reports had been accurate all along. The Corsair's inverted gull wing, angling sharply downward from the fuselage before sweeping upward toward the tips, was unlike anything they had encountered. Even from a distance, it was instantly recognizable. The design looked aggressive, almost predatory, and for the Japanese pilots who soon faced it in combat, the Corsair's appearance was only the first surprise. Its capabilities would leave a much deeper impression. The unusual wing shape was no stylistic flourish. It represented a clever engineering solution to a formidable challenge. The Corsair had been conceived around one of the most powerful aircraft engines available to the Allies during the war, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp. This immense 18-cylinder, twin-row radial engine produced over 2,000 horsepower, an astonishing output for its day. It was an engine so powerful that it transformed the Corsair into a machine capable of speeds previously unreachable by naval fighters. But raw power alone does not make a great aircraft. Harnessing that power required pushing the limits of every aspect of the airframe. The enormous engine demanded a correspondingly massive propeller, more than 13 feet in diameter. Such a propeller posed a problem. On a conventional straight-wing aircraft, maintaining enough ground clearance during takeoff and landing would require long landing gear legs. Landing gear that tall would be structurally weak, excessively heavy, and aerodynamically inefficient. Such compromises would eliminate the advantages provided by the massive engine. Vought engineers approached the problem with ingenuity. By designing wings that bent downward sharply near the fuselage, they allowed the landing gear to be mounted at a much lower point. This meant the struts could be shorter, stronger, lighter, and capable of retracting cleanly into the wing. The inverted gull wing was not a stylistic oddity. It was the elegant solution to a fundamental engineering challenge, one that preserved the aerodynamic efficiency crucial for high-speed flight. The wing design also delivered an unplanned benefit. The angle of the inverted gull wing strengthened the wing root, allowing the Corsair to withstand tremendous stress during high-speed dives. These dive maneuvers would become one of the aircraft's signature combat techniques, enabling pilots to capitalize on the Corsair's exceptional speed and structural integrity. Despite its unconventional shape, the Corsair was aerodynamically optimized. The wing fuselage junction minimized drag and helped the aircraft exceed 400 miles per hour in level flight. At the time of its introduction, the Corsair became the fastest single-engine fighter in the United States inventory and one of the fastest in the entire world. Yet the Corsair's first experiences with the U.S. Navy were far from smooth. While the Navy had placed the initial orders and expected the Corsair to become its primary carrier-borne fighter, the aircraft revealed some significant challenges during carrier testing. The long nose created by the massive radial engine severely limited forward visibility on approach. As a carrier pilot descended toward the deck, the edge of the flight deck vanished beneath the Corsair's nose, forcing pilots to rely on peripheral cues and side-slipping techniques that were far from ideal. Landing gear issues compounded these visibility problems. Although the inverted gull wing allowed for shorter struts, the gear still had a tendency to cause abrupt, jarring bounces on touchdown. Many landings resulted in the aircraft missing the arrestor wires entirely, skidding forward or bouncing dangerously close to the deck edge. Early variants also suffered from a tail wheel that was difficult to control on landing rollouts. Frustrated, sailors and test pilots gave the aircraft nicknames like hose nose, referencing both its long snout and its challenging behavior on the deck. For a time, the Navy relegated the Corsair to land-based operations, preferring the more manageable Grumman Hellcat for shipboard duty. But the U.S. Marine Corps, operating from island airfields in the Solomons, had no such reservations. The Marines accepted the Corsair eagerly. From fixed bases, its landing difficulties were manageable. What mattered most was the aircraft's incredible performance. When Marine pilots climbed into the cockpit and pushed the throttle forward, they experienced a type of acceleration and power unmatched by any other Allied fighter in the Pacific. Marine aviators quickly realized they had been handed a different breed of machine. Gregory "Pappy" Boyenton, commander of VMF 214, the famed Black Sheep Squadron, described the Corsair with a mixture of admiration and pride. The aircraft, he said, could do everything. It was fast enough to outrun or catch any Japanese fighter. It was tough enough to survive hits that would down a Zero. And its firepower, 6.5 caliber Browning machine guns, 3 in each wing, could rip an enemy aircraft apart with a single well-timed burst. Its speed, dive capability, and rugged construction made it a nearly perfect match for the combat style Allied pilots were beginning to adopt. By December 1943, the arrival of the Corsair in the Solomons began to reshape the air war. For nearly 2 years, the Mitsubishi A6M0 had dominated American aircraft in maneuverability, range, and tactical flexibility. It excelled in tight turning dogfights, and early in the war, American pilots who attempted to confront it using traditional dogfighting techniques paid the price. But as pilots learned, and as aircraft like the Corsair entered service, the balance shifted. The Zero, lightly built and lacking armor, could not withstand the heavy firepower of the Corsair. Its lack of self-sealing fuel tanks and minimal pilot protection made it dangerously vulnerable. The Corsair was built according to a different philosophy. American engineers prioritized survivability and speed. Pilots were encased in armor plating. Fuel tanks were designed to seal after being punctured. The aircraft could absorb punishment that would destroy the fragile Zero. And most importantly, it could dive away from danger or into an attack with astonishing acceleration. In a dive, the Corsair could reach speeds exceeding 450 miles per hour, far beyond what a Zero could safely follow.
American pilots abandoned attempts to outmaneuver Japanese fighters and instead adopted energy tactics, specifically boom and zoom attacks. A Corsair would climb to altitude, position above an enemy formation, and then dive at high speed, firing a burst before zooming back skyward. By the time an enemy pilot reacted, the Corsair was already climbing away, safe from counterattack. This tactic exploited every strength the Corsair possessed while minimizing risk. Japanese pilots attempted to counter with turning engagements, trying to lure Corsairs into the Zero's area of advantage. But experienced American pilots refused the bait. Dogfighting, in the traditional sense, was becoming obsolete, replaced by vertical maneuvering, altitude control, and speed management. The Corsair was perfectly suited for this new style of air combat. And then there was the sound. The Corsair's massive engine required tremendous airflow, drawn through a central intake in the cowling. As the aircraft dove at high speed, the rush of air through the intake and over the airframe produced a distinctive, eerie whistle. The sound rose in pitch and volume as the Corsair accelerated. For those on the ground, the whistle was often the first and last warning of an impending attack. Japanese soldiers described hearing an otherworldly shriek moments before machine gun fire tore into their positions. Pilots in the air felt a chill as the sound cut through the roar of battle. Japanese forces gave the Corsair a name that reflected both the sound and the terror it inspired: Whistling Death.
For the troops and pilots who faced it, the nickname was not an exaggeration. The psychological impact proved as significant as the physical destruction the aircraft inflicted. By early 1944, Japan's once formidable air arm suffered catastrophic losses. Many of the elite pilots who had carried Japan through 1942 and 1943 were gone. Japan's industry could not replace aircraft quickly enough, and Japan's training system, crippled by fuel shortages and limited resources, could not produce skilled pilots at the pace required. New pilots often arrived in combat with as little as 40 or 50 flight hours, barely acquainted with their aircraft and not remotely prepared for the advanced tactics employed by experienced American aces flying faster, tougher, more powerful machines. The results were devastatingly one-sided. Corsair squadrons achieved kill ratios previously unimaginable. For every Corsair lost in air-to-air combat, approximately 11 Japanese aircraft were destroyed. In some units, the ratio climbed even higher. The loss of air superiority forced Japan to adopt desperate tactics, most notably the kamikaze missions that emerged in late 1944. These suicide attacks were a grim acknowledgement that Japan could no longer compete in conventional air combat. Inexperienced pilots in outdated or inferior aircraft had no chance against Corsairs, defended by radar networks, combat-experienced pilots, and overwhelming firepower. Corsair pilots played a central role in defending American naval forces against these attacks. Their speed allowed them to intercept incoming aircraft at distance. Their firepower enabled them to destroy targets before they reached the fleet. During the Battle of Okinawa in 1945, Corsairs maintained constant patrols, engaging waves of kamikaze aircraft in some of the most intense aerial combat of the war. Their presence saved countless ships and thousands of lives. On Okinawa itself, the Corsair became a near-constant presence overhead. Ground troops grew accustomed to its shape, its speed, and its whistle, a sound that for American forces meant support was on the way. For Japanese defenders huddled in caves or fortifications, the whistle became a signal of impending destruction. Corsairs strafed troop concentrations, destroyed defensive positions, and provided close air support with bombs and high-velocity aircraft rockets. The psychological toll of this unrelenting assault contributed to the gradual collapse of Japanese resistance during the grueling campaign. By June 1945, Okinawa had fallen. The Corsair's role in the Pacific War had evolved from a controversial naval fighter to a dominant air superiority platform, and then into a versatile fighter-bomber. By the end of the war, Corsair pilots had destroyed more than 2,100 Japanese aircraft. The aircraft proved rugged, adaptable, and deadly. Many damaged Corsairs managed to return to base after sustaining severe hits, testament to their construction and durability. Yet the Corsair's story did not end with World War II. When conflict erupted on the Korean Peninsula in 1950, the Corsair returned to combat, transformed into a specialized close air support platform. Later variants, such as the F4U-5 and F4U-7, featured improved engines, updated cockpits, and expanded weapon capabilities. No longer tasked primarily with air-to-air combat, the Corsair excelled as a ground attack aircraft. It carried rockets, bombs, and napalm, supporting UN troops in some of the harshest fighting of the war. The aircraft's ruggedness, stability, and firepower made it ideal for low-altitude attack missions in mountainous terrain. Through these conflicts, the Corsair demonstrated that innovation in aircraft design, no matter how unconventional, could produce enduring results. The inverted gull wing that once seemed strange became iconic. The immense engine, unmatched in power when the fighter first flew, propelled it into aviation history. Its speed, firepower, and durability reshaped aerial warfare in the Pacific. And its psychological impact, the shriek of the whistling death diving from the sky, left a legacy remembered by both the pilots who flew it and the soldiers who faced it. The Vought F4U Corsair was more than a fighter aircraft. It was a symbol of American industrial capacity, engineering ingenuity, and tactical adaptation. It embodied the shift in aerial warfare from maneuverability to energy tactics,
from fragile, lightweight designs to rugged, powerful machines capable of surviving intense combat. It dominated the skies from 1943 onward, helping to turn the tide in the Pacific and ensuring American pilots flew with every possible advantage. And for those who heard it, the growing whistle of compressed air, the rising scream of the intake, the roar of its radial engine, it was the harbinger of destruction. The sound that echoed across jungle valleys, island beaches, and fortified ridgelines. The sound that announced the arrival of a machine unmatched in its time. The sound of the aircraft the Japanese came to call the Whistling Death.